Hello guys, my name is Tatenda Moses Mandondo. I would like to welcome you to this first session. We are going to discuss the preparedness of schools as we approach the 2025 first academic term. So as we all know, the prevailing socio-political and economic situation in Zimbabwe, we would like to basically delve further into understanding or generate a discussion on how well different stakeholders involved within the school setup, how well are they prepared. We are looking at teachers as critical stakeholders. We are looking at learners as critical stakeholders. We are also looking at parents who provide and fund the education as very critical stakeholders, and also other outside elements who contribute to the whole education sector as a whole. So firstly, we understand that the issue of teacher remuneration is a very serious issue that is crippling the education sector. From what we can understand, from what we see from day to day, basic challenges that teachers are facing due to their low salaries they are receiving. I believe this salary, Mr. Masaraure, was one of the lowest salaries in the region. How would you respond to that?
Thanks, Comrade Attender, and thanks to the True Patriot podcast for hosting this very important discussion where we then have to explore the challenges being faced ahead of the scheduled schools opening on the 14th of January 2025. What is clear is that Zimbabwean teachers are some among the most remunerated teachers in the region. Of course, if you're going to be looking across sub-Saharan Africa, you will find the minimum paid teacher being the average salary for a teacher being around $600 or so. But if you then come back to Zimbabwe, you'll find the teacher earning around $300. But then what is worse off is the cost of living in Zimbabwe. If you're going to be comparing the cost of living in Zimbabwe, comparing to the cost of living maybe to South Africa, for as an example, you find that the cost of living in Zimbabwe is over 60% to that in South Africa. If you want to compare it to cost of living in Zambia, maybe it's actually around 62% or so. But then what that means is you would then expect the teachers in Zimbabwe to earn more than their regional neighbors who have a lower cost of living condition. So unfortunately, they earn much less. In South Africa, you then find someone earning around a minimum of around 700 to 800 US dollars as monthly salary. But yet their cost of living is also slightly low. So this then means that the teacher in Zimbabwe is reduced to be a pauper. And now when your salary is very low, but you still need to pay for the basic needs, you are forced then to go and borrow. So you then go and look at the debt burden on the shoulder of the Zimbabwean teacher and on that civil servant. You realize that over 95% of teachers and civil servants in Zimbabwe are trapped in unsustainable debt. And now this then means that from the $300 US that we are speaking to, teachers end up getting a monthly income of $120, $100, some $90. Some don't even get anything on their payslip. We have instances of teachers who now earn around $12, some get $0. But then we have teachers who then borrow every month to pay the interest of loans that are already existing. So they're so trapped in debt that they won't escape. They don't have enough to pay to repay the debts, so they're now looking at borrowing to repay the interest from existing debts. So it's a serious debt crisis. But so you then look at schools opening. These teachers are parents. They also have children who want to go to school. So if they can't afford to pay for their own children, it means they cannot afford to be teaching anyone's children. And most of them are then really, especially in rural areas, raising genuine concerns that they cannot even travel to their workplace, which makes it impossible for the schools to open. So if we are going to be looking at the education ecosystem, the teaching front becomes the most affected, where teachers will struggle to make it to the classroom to teach other people's children because their children already ordinarily stay at home.
Okay, from what I understand, you're also the president of the Amalgamated Teachers Union of Zimbabwe, ARTUZ. From what I picked on your work, you managed to establish what you called parent-teacher associations, and I believe there are some views that you might have collected on the nature of how well parents are prepared for this coming school term?
Yeah, we have a dialogue with the parenting community under our parents teacher associations, and we actually did another survey to try to gauge their preparedness ahead of schools opening. But the economic crisis that we are enduring as a nation obviously makes it also impossible for the parents themselves to fund education. Remember, the government of Zimbabwe has already reneged on its Section 75 responsibility of providing state-funded education. So our education is funded from the pockets of the ordinary working people, the peasants, the workers themselves. They pay everything for learners to access education. So in a context where there are massive retrenchments, you've seen what has been happening in the mining sector where people are losing their jobs. You also look at the way those who are employed are not getting consistent incomes. Salaries are deferred, even for civil servants. Even you look at the rate of unemployment itself, where diagonally over 90% of our people are not in formal employment. And then you look at the informal employment, which is also suffering from constant attacks from the regime which is governing today, because they choose to make the informal economy illegal when it is the only economy in Zimbabwe. So what that means for the honored parent, they do not have the money to be buying the learning materials. They do not have the money to be paying for the tuition fees that are demanding from the school setup. And unfortunately, the government, which is supposed to come in, step in and provide education for, particularly for, they've said they will provide for vulnerable communities. From 2022, they failed to disburse funds under the basic education access module. So we have then high levels of dropouts that we've been witnessing over the past years, and with millions of our learners who are out of school because parents cannot afford to pay. Even Zimbabwe makes education is compulsory, basic education is compulsory. No parent is supposed to keep their children at home. All children should be in class, but they cannot be in class when the state is not facilitating the process of delivering education in the classroom. So those school leaders who are running the school, they are left with no option but to turn away learners who are not able to pay. So we also have the issue of a drought where food supplies are actually at their lowest. So you have learners last term were collapsing because of hunger. That situation is still to be addressed. We understand government have been telling anyone and everyone okay to listen that they are going to be delivering food in schools. The delivery really has been erratic, mainly in primary schools. They've received some wheat and other supplies, mainly the starch component of the meals, but it is not enough, and our schools have had to ask the learners themselves to then pay for the relish, among other things, but then the learners don't afford. So at the end of the day, you find learners eating wheat. In those schools, we are fortunate enough to receive something, but for the school learners in secondary schools, they haven't received much, but also they still don't have meals back home. That's the challenge now, when the parent can't afford the school fees, they cannot afford the learning materials, they cannot afford to feed their own children. But most unfortunately now, for the most unfortunate component now is that, given the context of underpayment of teachers, the parent and the teacher have had private arrangements where the parent again has to pay a cushion to the teacher under the extra lessons framework. Now this extra lessons framework is unregulated, and mostly teachers then would then have to charge anything. And at Amalgamated Rural Teachers Union of Zimbabwe, we don't encourage teachers to charge for extra lessons. We believe that teachers and parents should unite and jointly confront the government with the solution holder. We're supposed to pay a decent wage to the teacher and then provide state-funded education. But in the current context, the parents still have to pay the teacher. So the parent can't pay the teacher, so your child will miss out on extra lessons, especially in urban areas where the teacher is teaching during the slot allocated for extra lessons. During normal time, there's no learning. So it is really a big burden on the parent, because the government is reneged on the mandate to provide state-funded basic education.
Okay. Basing on your survey on school preparedness, I also managed to note a number of reservations from different sectors, especially amongst learners who've been complaining about the rising differences between urban metropolitan schools and rural schools, and the quality of education that they are getting. Because if you were to understand and thoroughly analyze and scrutinize this whole scenario in Zimbabwe currently obtaining, it's been over 20 years in the cooking, and nothing is really being done to correct the anomaly. And I remember at some point the amalgamated road chairs in Zimbabwe was fighting for a rural equalization fund to make sure that there is basic infrastructure in schools, there is access to internet, which are some of the issues that learners have been complaining about, especially in rural areas, that they are always just being left behind at the end of the day, because if the school calendar kicks in, they have no way to stop it from going ahead, but they're just left behind. So what's your view on learners, especially in rural areas, being at the backdrop of this?
Thank you so much. You raise a very critical point, but we also have to understand something here, that as we are opening schools, also there's the issue of the curriculum. I will come back to that issue, because also the learners, if they are going to find something to learn, there should be at least a syllabus. So unfortunately for the heritage-based curriculum, so there is no syllabus in the school. So the learner, if you are going to be asking the learner to say, okay, are you ready to go to school? They can ask you a basic question to say, what are we supposed to be learning? Because the heritage-based curriculum is simply given the framework, but they've never delivered the syllabus for mathematics, for English, and all the other subjects. So the teacher doesn't know what they are going to be teaching when schools open. Ordinarily, we know the teacher should supposed to produce scheme books ahead of schools opening. But when there is no planning of what is going to be taught on day one. So it's a disaster, because obviously our schools then become playgrounds. And now learners, when our schools become playgrounds, they are not motivated to go back to those schools. So you find then we have the issue of the rising child labor coming through, where learners actually choose to go and engage in work that can bring some returns, because they know that the school is now a playground. You put it well that in rural areas it's waste. Look, what is the internet coverage in Zimbabwe? We are seeing around 35% or some when people who are connected. The majority of our people in rural areas are not connected to the internet. We have proposed the interventions, so but the internet now is the center of learning in nowadays, and those in the rural areas are left behind. But we have been proposing a digital offline libraries that are very affordable, the government could have secured for our learners. Unfortunately, because of their bureaucracy and the tendency to push for corruption ahead of servicing, they are still to adopt that, because in the absence of the internet connectivity, with some decent digital libraries, even our learners in rural areas could at least be able to access some more information than they are getting at the moment. So the bigger challenge that we face is also that Zimbabwe's Education Act does not even define what a school is. If you want to read the South African Education Act, there's a clear definition of what a school is. They will tell you that a school should have so many buildings, should have a library, a school should have a laboratory, a school should have a perimeter. In Zimbabwe, the government can open a school under a tree. So you hear the Minister of Education says in 2024 we constructed 105 schools just in 2024 alone. But if you're going to ask to say, we have seen the schools, no one has seen them. But if you're going to dig deeper, you find that even people who are learning under trees, they are saying they are at a school that was constructed by the state. So what that means is that learners do not have a library, they do not have a laboratory, and now there's no curriculum, and now there's no internet connectivity, and they are said to be going to school. So it's just a name, like where the government just tries to feel good and just say schools are opening. But we know that there's no school that is going to open on the 14th of January, especially given the context that there's no syllabus, but there's nothing to teach. But also more importantly, there are a lot of learners that we continue to lie that they're in school when they're not in school. We proposed that there is money that is coming from the Universal Service Fund, where when you are buying your airtime, there's money that you contribute. We believe such money should be used to connect schools. And last time we heard there was a lot of corruption in the portals around the use of those resources. They were abused. We find politicians trying to be popular, abusing those resources collected by portals. Such resources should easily have been channeled towards our schools for connectivity. We've also said that we have resources that are collected through the Rural Electrification Fund, where obviously when you are buying electricity, a percentage is going to rural electrification. Where is the money going? The politicians will choose to electrify their farms ahead of electrifying the school. But we are saying the school is the center of development, where if you are going to be empowering these young minds, that can be the foundation of national development. But because our politicians are selfish, they will pour that money towards electrification of their homes and villages ahead of the school